The human soldier floated in the endless dark, his body inside a broken escape pod, his mind slipping between dream and silence. Cold air hissed through cracked pipes. Red lights flickered weakly, and alarms wailed a sound like dying whispers. The ship that once carried him was gone, torn apart in the battle, and now only drifting metal remained in the great sea of stars. He tried to breathe, but the oxygen was thin. Every breath burned his chest. Every second felt longer than the last. His vision swam, and the soldier thought this would be his final moment. There was no rescue near, no allies, no human voice, only the vast black sky stretching forever. He remembered the battle, flashes of fire across the void, enemy weapons tearing through steel, comrades screaming through broken radios, his own fighters spinning out of control as the engines burst in flames, and then silence. Only silence and the empty night. He had survived the destruction, but not for long. The cold was already biting at his bones. As he drifted half-conscious, a strange light touched the edges of his eyes. At first he thought it was only a dying spark, another vision from his fading mind, but the light grew stronger, golden and pure, not the cruel red fire of battle, not the cold blue glow of machines, but something softer, something alive, and his heart tried to beat faster though his body was too weak to follow. Shapes moved outside the cracked window of the pod, tall shadows wrapped in radiant glow. They were not human ships, not the sharp edges of war machines, but smooth forms like flowing water, alien in every way, and they were drawing closer, moving with calm purpose, as if the dark itself opened to welcome them. The soldier tried to raise his hand, fingers trembling, but the weight of his own arm was too much. He wanted to shout, but his voice was nothing more than a dry rasp. Yet somehow the light reached him, wrapping the broken pod, lifting it away from the endless drift, carrying him into a new unknown. The pod was pulled into the heart of a vessel, a chamber filled with warm glow. Air shimmered with strange energy. The soldier felt the pressure change, felt the pod being opened by gentle machines guided by alien hands. They touched him not with fear, not with violence, but with careful strength, as if he was fragile glass, and they laid him upon a surface that felt softer than steel but stronger than stone. Voices spoke around him, not in human tongue, but in soft tones that carried meaning even through sound he could not understand. There was no threat in their speech, only concern, only the urgency of saving life. He saw faces now, tall beings with silver skin that reflected light like flowing rivers, their eyes large and bright like twin moons, their movements calm and graceful, as if every step was a song. They were the Valari, though he did not yet know the name, a race who held life sacred above all, a people who believed that even a single breath was worth protecting. They looked at the broken human with wonder and with worry, for never had they expected to find such a being in their path, floating alone in the cruel dark. The soldier coughed, pain ripping through his chest, blood on his lips, but his eyes burned with memory, the memory of his world, of blue skies and green fields, of oceans that stretched endless yet were never empty, of voices laughing, of fire and war and struggle. And in the haze of weakness he whispered one word, a word that was his anchor, his hope, his home. Earth. The sound was faint, yet the Valari heard it, their ears sharper than any human's. The word carried through the chamber like a spark. Their eyes widened, their graceful hands stilled. Silence fell heavy, for the name was known even here, far from the place he called home, known but spoken only in shadows. Earth. The word was a memory in their records, a warning told in council halls, a name linked with war and with legend, for the humans were said to be fierce, unyielding, a species that vanished from this part of the stars long ago. Some believed them destroyed, others whispered they had only gone into silence. Yet here was proof, living, bleeding, whispering in their care. The Valari healer bent close, placing a hand of shimmering light upon the soldier's chest. The energy flowed into him, his breath deepened, though pain still clung to every part of him. His eyes closed, and he sank into dark sleep once more, but his final whisper lingered in the air like fire refusing to die. The Valari looked at each other, their silver eyes wide, their voices hushed with fear and awe. For they had chosen to save one life without question, yet the life they saved was not just anyone, not just another wanderer, but something far more dangerous, far more powerful, far more uncertain. One of them spoke at last, words trembling like the edge of a blade. A human here after so long, after so many stories, how can this be? Another whispered, voice low with warning. If this is true, if humans still live, the balance of the stars will change. Nothing will remain the same. The chamber fell silent again, only the steady breath of the soldier breaking the stillness. The Valari stood frozen between awe and fear, between duty and dread, and though they did not yet know it, the choice they made to save him would ignite events that would shake the galaxy, and no empire would be left untouched. Suspense hung heavy in the air as their voices joined in one final whisper. A human here, that cannot be. The chamber lights glowed like liquid silver. Shadows of the Valari stretched across the curved walls. Their tall forms gathered around the human, his chest rising slowly, his breaths uneven but stronger than before. The whisper of earth still clung to the air, and none of them could forget it. None of them dared to. The eldest healer spoke first, her voice soft yet firm. We have saved him, but do we know what we have done? Her silver eyes moved from one face to another. He is human, and the stories of humans are not stories of peace. They're tales of war, of fire, of worlds broken. Another Valari, younger, with a voice trembling but filled with resolve, answered, and yet he is alive, and life is sacred. Our law is clear, no matter who or what. One life must be saved, and we chose to save him. Their voices carried through the chamber like wind in deep caves, some filled with fear, some with curiosity, all with uncertainty. The human lay still, unaware of the weight his presence had placed upon them, unaware that his very breath pulled the Valari into the center of a storm they never wished to face. The Valari were known in the galaxy as healers and guardians of the weak. They held no armies. They built no warships. Their vessels were made for travel and care, not for conquest. They wandered the stars to help those left broken by war, patching wounds, guiding refugees, carrying orphans to safe havens. They never took sides, never raised weapons, and because of this, the great empires tolerated them, sometimes mocked them, but never destroyed them. For even warlords saw use in healers who asked nothing in return. Yet the word human was different. It was a spark that lit fear in old hearts, a word that made even cruel empires pause, for humans were remembered not as healers, but as fighters who rose again and again no matter how broken they became. There were legends that in the past, human fleets turned battles upside down, that they struck enemies greater than themselves and yet endured, that they carried within them a fire that no darkness could ever kill, and then they vanished, leaving only questions, leaving only silence. Now here before the Valari lay proof that humanity was not gone, proof wrapped in blood and weakness, but proof all the same. The council chamber of the Valari ship filled with murmurs. They debated if they should hide him, if they should send him away, if they should risk keeping him alive. For if the empires learned of this, the Valari would no longer be seen as harmless wanderers. They would be marked as traitors, allies of humans, and war would fall upon them like storm on glass. Still, others argued that to abandon him would break their oldest oath, the oath written into every Valari heart since the first voyage into the stars. Life is sacred. Life must be protected, no matter the cost, no matter the danger. To betray this oath would be to betray themselves, and that they could never do. As they debated, the human stirred, his body trembling, his hand reaching weakly for something unseen, his voice cracked with thirst, with pain, but words slipped free. Help them. Do not let them fall. The Valari froze, for though his words were broken, though they did not know who he meant, there was fire behind them, the kind of fire no dying man should hold, the kind of fire that belonged only to a fighter, only to a survivor, only to one who had seen too much and yet still clung to life. The healer placed her hand upon his forehead, calming him in his sleep once more, and in her eyes there was something new, not only fear, not only duty, but also a strange respect, as if she knew this fragile being was more than his weakness, more than his broken body. He was a storm yet to come. Hours passed, and outside the Valari vessel, signals moved across the void, unseen by human eyes, messages carried in secret networks of shadow, whispers traded by empires that fed on fear and power, and in those whispers the word human appeared once again. A human breathes, a human has been saved. The Valari did not yet know it, but their act of mercy had already been seen, already been noted, already marked by those who would not forgive such a choice. Fleets shifted quietly. Captains were ordered to prepare, and somewhere in the black, a voice cold and cruel hissed, "If it is true, if the humans rise again, then we must strike before they awaken." Inside the chamber, the Valari continued their debate, their voices growing sharper. Some cried that they must deliver the human to the empires at once, to show loyalty, to protect their people. Others refused with rage, declaring that such betrayal would poison their souls forever, and the division grew wide, wide enough to tear them apart. At last the eldest healer raised her hands, silver light flowing from her palms, her voice cutting through the storm of words. "Enough, we chose to save him, and we will not undo that choice. We will heal him. We will keep him hidden until he chooses his path, for to cast him away is to cast away our own hearts." The chamber fell into silence, heavy, uneasy, but silence nonetheless. The decision was made, the path chosen, yet none of them could shake the fear that this path would lead them into fire, into chaos, into the teeth of empires far stronger than themselves. The human slept still, unaware, his mind trapped in dreams of earth, of skies he longed to see again, of comrades lost, of promises unkept. And though he looked weak, though he looked near death, within him burned a spark, the same spark that had carried his kind through countless trials, the same spark that would one day call others to his side. As the Valari left the chamber, their whispers followed them like shadows. A human here, after all this time, after all the silence, what will it mean? What storm will it bring? The eldest healer paused at the door, looking back once more at the fragile figure resting upon the bed of light, and in her heart she knew the truth. The galaxy would never be the same again. And in the endless dark beyond their vessel, enemies were already moving, their ships preparing, their weapons ready, their voices filled with dread and anger, for the name of humanity had returned, and with it came fear that no empire could ignore. Darkness gave way to dim light as the human soldier opened his eyes. The glow of alien walls above him shimmered like liquid metal, and the soft hum of energy surrounded his weak body. He tried to move, but pain spread through every muscle, chains of fire running across his ribs and arms. Yet he was alive, and that alone filled him with shock, for he remembered the void. He remembered the cold bite of death. And now he lay breathing once again. He turned his head slowly and saw them, tall beings with silver skin and radiant eyes. The Valari, their forms graceful as though carved from streams of light. They watched him in silence, some with awe, some with fear, their hands folded behind them, their bodies still as stone. Yet their gaze carried questions that weighed like mountains, questions he could not yet answer. The soldier tried to speak, his throat dry as sand, but the words barely escaped. Why, he whispered, and his voice cracked. "Why did you save me?" The eldest healer stepped forward, her long robe flowing like mist, her voice steady yet soft. "Because life is sacred, because no breath should be lost if it can be held. You are alive, and that is enough for us." Her words struck him deeply, for in war he had seen so much death. He had seen comrades left behind. He had seen mercy buried beneath blood. Yet here stood strangers who risked their own safety simply to keep one dying man alive, and his chest ached with gratitude, though his body was too broken to show it. His mind wandered to earth, to the people he had lost, to the families waiting, to the world that seemed so far away. He thought of the children who once laughed in green fields, of the oceans that roared with life, of the cities scarred by battles, yet still standing proud. And he knew that if his people still lived, if they still walked beneath the stars, then he must tell them of this. He must tell them of the Valari who gave him mercy when no one else would. He clenched his hand weakly, his voice breaking yet filled with fire. I swear, one day, humanity will return this kindness. One day, we will not forget. The Valari shifted uneasily, whispers passing between them, for the name humanity was heavy with meaning, a name they spoke only in fear, a name buried in their oldest records. They remembered tales of human armies that fought with impossible resolve. They remembered the warnings that humans never yielded, that they could not be broken, and to hear a human promise return was both terrifying and strange. The younger healer stepped closer, her eyes wide with curiosity. She asked gently, "Do your people still live? Do they wait for you?" The soldier closed his eyes, pain twisting his face. "I do not know. We were scattered, hunted, worlds burned, but we endure. We always endure. If even one still breathes, then we are not gone." His words carried a weight that filled the chamber. Even the silence seemed to lean closer to hear them, for though he lay weak, his voice carried strength, a strength that spoke of a people who refused to vanish no matter the cost. And the Valari felt both wonder and fear, for this was not the voice of a dying man. It was the voice of storm yet unbroken. The soldier struggled to sit, his body trembling like brittle wood. The Valari moved to stop him, but he raised a hand, his eyes burning with determination. "Listen, I am one, only one. But if others hear that you saved me, they will come, and when they come, they will not forget what you did. They will stand with you." The Valari looked at one another, uncertain, torn between hope and dread. For if his words were true, then their act of mercy could bring allies stronger than any they had known, yet also enemies fiercer than any they could face. For the empires would not allow humanity to rise again, not without resistance, not without war. As they debated quietly among themselves, the soldier sank back into the bed of light, exhaustion dragging him down, his breath shallow yet steady. And in his fading mind he saw visions, visions of great ships returning, of banners raised high, of voices shouting not in despair, but in triumph. He saw humanity awakened, answering the dead of one life with the strength of many, and in that vision he found peace. Outside the chamber, the Valari leaders gathered, their words sharp, their voices heavy. Some said the human must be hidden forever. Some said he must be cast into the void once more. Others whispered that perhaps his presence was a gift, a chance for change, for protection, for something greater than their fragile, wandering ships. But all knew one truth. Their choice had already bound them, for they had saved him, and now they carried the weight of his kind upon their shoulders. In the dark edges of the galaxy, unseen eyes watched, listening to the faint signals of the Valari vessel, and when the word human surfaced in hidden channels, the watchers spread it like fire. The message traveled fast, carried by those who feared, by those who remembered. A human has been found, a human lives. The empires stirred in their cold halls. Commanders whispered in the silence of great warships. If humanity still breathes, then we must strike before they rise. We must end them before their fire spreads again. Yet the soldier did not know this. His body rested. His oath whispered into the air, a promise that clung to every corner of the chamber. The Valari could not ignore it. They could not escape it. They had saved one life, but in doing so they had awakened the shadow of an entire people, and the galaxy would soon feel the weight of that shadow. As the chamber grew quiet, the eldest healer whispered to herself, voice trembling though she tried to hide it. "We have saved a human, and with that we have written a future we cannot yet see." The human's hand twitched, his lips moved in sleep, and though no voice escaped, the oath remained, silent but unbroken, a vow that would carry across stars, a vow that would echo in the hearts of those who heard it. And in that silence, destiny shifted, fragile yet unstoppable, carried by the breath of one who refused to die. Far beyond the calm chambers of the Valari vessel, the galaxy stirred with unease. In the cold halls of distant empires, whispers moved like fire in dry grass. Whispers that carried a name long thought lost, a name feared and spoken only in secret, the name of humanity. Signals spread across hidden networks, carried by spies and merchants, by drifters and hunters, and the message was always the same. A human lives, a human has been saved, a human breathes again, and with every telling the fear grew stronger. For if one human lived, then more could rise, and if more could rise, then the galaxy itself would tremble once more. On a dark world of endless stone, a council of warlords gathered, their bodies armored in metal and bone, their eyes burning with cold fire. They slammed their fists upon the table of iron, and their voices roared like storms. We must strike. We must end this before the fire spreads. For if the humans return, there will be no empire safe, no throne secure, no power unchallenged. Enshadowed fleets drifting between dead stars, commanders spoke in hushed voices, their hands clenched upon weapons of war, their ships ready, their crews restless. They remembered the ancient wars. They remembered how human fleets fought like beasts cornered, how they burned brighter the closer death came, how they turned defeat into fury, and those centuries had passed, the memory had never died, the fear had never faded, it had only waited, buried but alive. The Valari vessel drifted unaware of the gathering storm. Inside their walls the human still lay recovering, his breath steady but his body frail, his mind burning with visions of earth and of oaths sworn. He did not know that already the empires marked him as a spark that must be crushed, that fleets were already moving in silence, drawn not by mercy, but by fear. The Valari leaders met in their council chamber once more, voices sharp, faces pale with worry. Some argued they must cast the human away before it was too late. Some argued they must hide him in the deepest corners of space. And a few whispered they must prepare to fight, though they had no armies, no weapons to match the power of empires, for mercy alone could not stop fire once it was lit. The eldest healer listened to them all, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the chamber, and she raised her voice with calm strength. We chose to save him, and we will not undo our choice. We will heal him. We will trust in his words, for he swore that humanity will return, and though fear surrounds us, we cannot betray what we are. Her words calmed some, angered others, yet no one could deny the truth. Their oath bound them. Their hearts bound them. To abandon the human now would be to break themselves, and so they chose to stand with him, those shadows gathered outside their fragile walls. In the silence of the void, a signal slipped free, a hidden message from the Valari intercepted by unseen ears. It carried the human's whisper of earth, a single word but enough to confirm every rumor, and the enemy who received it smiled coldly. For now they knew where to strike. Now they knew where the last ember of humanity burned. Across the stars fleets began to turn, engines lit with fury, their courses aimed toward Valari space. Hundreds of ships moving like predators drawn to wounded prey, silent and relentless, their weapons ready, their commanders eager to erase the spark before it could blaze. Inside the Valari vessel, the human awoke once more, his eyes sharp though his body weak. He saw the fear in their faces, he heard the whispers they thought hidden, and he understood. He knew that the galaxy would not allow his kind to rise without blood. He knew that enemies were already coming. And though he could not yet fight, he swore within his heart that he would not let the Valari pay for saving him. Not alone. He spoke to them with fire in his weak voice. If they come, they will come for me, not for you, but know this, when my people hear what you have done, they will come too, and they will not let you fall. The Valari listened, torn between hope and dread, their eyes wide, their hearts heavy, for his words promised salvation, yet also war. Protection, yet also destruction, and they did not know which would arrive first, the hand of mercy or the blade of vengeance. That night in the quiet of the ship, the younger healer stood beside the human as he slept, her eyes filled with questions, her voice barely a whisper. Why do you fight? Why do your people never yield? Why do you endure when others would fall? His lips moved in sleep, his voice soft yet fierce. Because if we fall, then there is no one left to rise, because someone must stand, because we cannot be anything else. Her heart trembled at his words, for they carried no pride, no arrogance, only truth, a truth as unyielding as stone, and she realized then why the galaxy feared humans. not for their weapons, not for their strength, but for the fire in their souls that refused to die. Beyond their walls, enemy ships cut through the dark, their captains eager to silence that fire, eager to erase the ember before it spread, and soon the stars around Valari space would blaze not with peace, but with war. The Valari did not yet see them. The human did not yet know how close they were, but destiny had already shifted, the shadows had already moved, and the galaxy was already watching. Suspense hung heavy in the silence, for the first move had been made, the hunters were coming, and the prey had yet to realize the storm about to break upon them. The Valari vessel drifted quietly among nameless stars, its silver hull reflecting the glow of distant suns. Yet inside the chamber the air was heavy with fear. The human soldier sat upright at last, though his body trembled, his eyes sharp with fire, though his breath still carried the weight of pain. He had heard enough whispers, seen enough fear in their shining faces. He knew what must be done, and he knew the danger that would follow. He asked for tools, for access to their ancient communication systems, and the Valari hesitated, their voices sharp with warning, their hands clutching robes as though to hide from the choice before them. If you send a signal, one of them said, the empires will hear, they will come sooner, they will strike us down. The human's voice rose with strength, though his ribs ached and his throat was raw. They're already coming, they will not wait, they have never waited, but if I send this signal, if even one of my people hear, then you will not stand alone. You saved me, and I will not let you fall without hope. The chamber filled with silence, his words heavy as stone, until at last the eldest healer bowed her head, her silver eyes closing. Then speak, call across the stars, and let fate decide what answer will come. The human was guided to the heart of their vessel, where the communication core pulsed like a living star, strange symbols glowing across its surface. The Valari used it to guide refugees, to send warnings of plague and famine, never to call for war, never to summon armies. But now they stepped aside and let the human approach, their fear held back by the weight of their choice. His fingers shook as he worked, remembering codes long buried in his memory, signals taught to him when he wore the uniform of his people, signals meant only for the darkest hour. When no other choice remained, he tapped the sequence, his heart pounding like thunder, and the machine awakened with a deep hum, light racing through its veins, a message born in fire. His voice carried through the core, carried into the dark void where countless ears might listen. This is Sergeant Kieran Hale of Earth. If any of my people still live, if any ship still sails under human command, know this, I am alive. I was saved by the Valari, a race who gave me mercy when no one else would. They risked everything for me, and now they are in danger. The empires move to crush them. I call upon you, I beg you, if humanity still breathes, then return not for me alone, but for those who saved me. Return and stand with them. The message pulsed into space, repeating again and again, a beacon of desperation and of hope, his voice raw but unbroken, each word a vow carried upon light, carried into the endless dark, where silence might answer or fire might respond. The Valari stood behind him, their faces pale, their hearts trembling. Some whispered prayers to their ancestors, others whispered fears that death itself now rushed toward them, and the human stood tall though his body sagged with weakness, his eyes burning with the oath he had spoken, his chest heaving with every word, until at last the signal ended, the hum of the machine fading into silence once more. The chamber was still, so still it seemed the stars themselves waited, but no answer came, only the quiet hum of the ship, only the beating of anxious hearts. Hours passed, then days, and still no voice, no signal, no fleet appearing from the dark. Hope began to wither in the Valari hearts, and some muttered that perhaps the humans were truly gone, perhaps the message had vanished into nothing, perhaps they had risked everything for a ghost. Yet the human refused to yield, his voice steady each time he spoke. They will come. If even one still breathes, they will come. I know it, I know my people. We do not abandon debts. We do not abandon those who give us mercy. But as the days stretched longer, the shadow of enemy fleets drew closer, unseen yet felt, like storm clouds crawling across the horizon. Whispers came through secret channels, words carried in fear. The hunters are moving. Their fleets turn toward Valari space. They will arrive soon. The Valari council grew restless, their voices sharp with panic. We must flee. We must hide. We cannot fight this storm. We cannot hold against such power. The human listened, his fists clenched, his body weak, yet his spirit unbroken. If you run, they will hunt you down. They will not forgive you for saving me. They will never forgive, but if you stand, even for a moment, then when my people arrive, they will find you still alive, and they will stand with you. They will stand because you gave me life when all was lost. The Valari trembled, their oaths battling with their fear. They had never fought, never carried weapons, yet their hearts were bound to mercy, bound to a promise they could not abandon. And so they stayed, though dread clawed at every thought, though the silence of the stars mocked them with each passing day. Then on the edge of the seventh night, the human awoke suddenly, his heart racing, his eyes fixed upon the window of stars, for there he saw it, a faint streak of light across the dark. Then another, and another, not meteors, not tricks of vision, but engines burning as ships entered the system, massive silhouettes breaking through the void. The Valari rushed to the viewports, their voices rising in disbelief, in awe, in fear, for these were not the sharp warships of the empires, not the cold hunters who devoured the weak. These ships were darker, heavier, bearing designs only seen in the old records, ships that spoke of a people who had not died, who had not vanished, who had only waited for the call to rise again. The human's eyes filled with fire and with tears, his voice breaking as he whispered, "They came by the stars, they came." The Valari stood frozen, their silver eyes wide, their hands trembling, for across the stars humanity had answered, and with their arrival the silence of waiting shattered. The storm was no longer one-sided. The prey was no longer alone. But in the dark beyond, the enemy fleets were already close, drawn by fear and by hatred, ready to strike, ready to burn, and soon the stars would blaze with war, a war the Valari had never known, a war that humanity had been born into. Suspense weighed heavy in every breath, for though the call had been answered, though ships of earth had returned, the question remained, would they arrive in time, or would the storm consume them all? The Valari ship shook as the human vessels broke through the veil of stars, their engines burning with power unseen for centuries, their metal frames scarred from forgotten battles, each hull carrying marks of survival rather than design. These were ships built not to shine, but to endure, to strike and then rise again. And the Valari gasped as the sight filled them with awe and with terror, for they had never seen warships before, never seen the raw power of a people forged in endless struggle. The human soldier pressed against the glass, his breath fogging the window, his heart racing with fire. He whispered names to himself, old designations from long years ago. These ships were not ghosts. They were real, alive, filled with his people. And though the Valari could not hear the words he spoke, they felt the weight of his soul pour into every syllable, like a prayer carried on broken wings. The Valari council gathered quickly, their robes swirling in fear, their voices rising in alarm. Some cried out that this was salvation. Others warned it was only doom disguised as hope, for where humans came war would follow. Where humans stood fire would burn. Yet the human soldier faced them, his back straight though his body weak. And he said, "You saved me, and because of that you are no longer alone. But if you turn away now, if you refuse their help, then the hunters will tear you apart. You cannot escape them. But with humanity beside you, even the strongest empire will tremble." The Valari leaders looked at each other, their silver eyes filled with uncertainty. And in that moment the ship's comms came alive, a voice breaking through with static, deep and commanding. "This is the battlecruiser Resolute. Identifying the source of the beacon. Identify yourself, confirm your status, and explain why a Valari vessel carries a human signal." The Valari froze, fear clutching their hearts, but the soldier stepped forward, his voice strong. "This is Sergeant Kieran Hale, Earthborn, survivor of the Frontier Wars. I was rescued by the Valari. They saved me. When no one else would, I sent the call. I asked for aid, not for myself, but for them, because the empires are moving to destroy them, and I will not let that happen, not while I still draw breath." The line was silent for a moment, only static hissing through, until the voice returned, colder yet steady. "Sergeant Hale, your signal was received by scattered fleets, fragments of what remains. Many doubted you. Some even thought it trap, but we came not out of certainty, but out of duty. If the Valari truly saved one of us, then they're owed more than silence. Prepare for contact. We are moving to your position." The Valari trembled at the words, their hearts caught between dread and hope, and the human turned to them, fire burning in his eyes. "You see, they came, they will fight, but we must stand with them, or none of us will survive." Yet even as hope flickered to life, darkness stretched across the horizon. Sensors screamed as signals multiplied, hundreds of enemy vessels piercing the void, hunters and warships of the Empire, drawn by the beacon, drawn by fear, drawn by hatred, their hulls like blades of black iron, their engines burning red like hungry eyes, and the Valari fell silent as they saw the endless tide approach. The council whispered in despair, "We cannot face this. No one can. This is not war. This is annihilation." The human's voice cut through, sharp as steel. "Yes, it is annihilation, but not of you, not today. Not if we fight together, not if you stand. You're not soldiers, I know, but you are not weak. You chose to save me when the galaxy would have left me to die, and that choice was courage greater than any weapon. If you stand beside us now, if you hold even for a moment, then humanity will not let you fall." The Valari looked upon him, their fears still deep, but his words carried the weight of fire, and slowly heads began to bow, hands began to tighten, voices began to whisper, "We will not flee. Not this time. Not while hope still lives." Outside, the human fleet shifted into formation, dark shapes cutting across the stars, their engines burning brighter as they prepared for battle, while the Empire's armada spread wide like a storm front, an ocean of steel closing in, the balance of survival resting on the fragile line between them. The Valari ship received another transmission, this time direct and sharp. "Valari vessel, you are to remain behind our lines. We will shield you, but be prepared. Once the first strike comes, you may not survive the aftershock. Brace yourselves." The Valari could hardly breathe, their chests heavy with dread, yet the human soldier smiled, a grim smile of someone who had walked through fire before. "You see, they know the cost, but they will pay it, and so will I." As the fleets closed in, silence fell upon the void, that terrible silence before war, the space between breaths when life itself holds still. Then without warning, the first shot ripped across the stars, a beam of fire cutting through the black, slamming into the Empire's vanguard, shields flaring, hulls burning, and the silence shattered into chaos. Explosions lit the heavens, ships tearing through the void like predators unleashed. The human fleet smaller but faster, striking like wolves, while the Empire surged like an endless tide, and between them the Valari vessel trembled, caught in the storm, their people clinging to each other as the stars themselves seemed to bleed. The human soldier stood tall even as the ship shook, his hand pressed against the glass, his eyes burning with fury. "This is only the beginning. The storm has come, but so have we, and I swear by every name of earth, we will not fall, not while hope still breathes." Yet as he spoke, deeper shadows stirred beyond the Empire fleet, massive shapes emerging, dreadnoughts the size of cities, weapons glowing with the power to shatter worlds, and the Valari gasped in terror, for the tide was greater than they had ever dreamed, greater than any force they could imagine. The human's face hardened, his voice low but unbroken. "Then we make our stand, no matter the cost." The stars blazed with fire, and war unlike any the Valari had ever known began. And though hope had come, the question lingered in every heart. Was it enough, or had they only delayed the inevitable? Suspense hung heavy, for the battle was only the first breath of a storm that could devour them all. The stars burned red as the battle raged across the endless void, human ships clashing with the Empire fleet, smaller vessels darting like wolves, striking then fading. while the Valari vessel shook between the storms of fire, its hull groaning as blasts rippled across the shields. The Valari clung to each other in terror, their hearts screaming that they would be torn apart. Yet the human soldier stood tall, his voice calm, though the fury of war blazed in his eyes. The Empire surged like an ocean without end, wave after wave of ships pouring through the black, their weapons slicing the heavens into ribbons of fire, their dreadnoughts looming like mountains of steel, unstoppable, unbreakable. Yet the human fleet pressed on, answering death with defiance, striking not for victory, but for survival, holding the line with the fury of those who refused to bow. The Valari council whispered in despair, their voices trembling. "It is too much, we cannot win. The Empire is endless. Why do the humans fight still? Why do they not flee?" And the soldier turned, his face hard as stone, his words sharp as iron. "Because we are human, because we do not run, because when one life is saved, when one hand is offered, we remember and we return, not with silence, not with thanks alone, but with everything we are and everything we have." Even as his words carried into the hearts of the Valari, the human fleet began to break, ships burning, hulls tearing apart. Yet each fall was not defeat. Each destruction was a weapon in itself. A wounded ship ramming into an enemy dreadnought, a burning frigate lashing out one last strike before shattering into debris. Every loss turned into resistance, every death into defiance. And the Valari watched with wide eyes as the humans fought like storms made flesh. Still the Empire pushed closer, their dreadnoughts focusing fire on the Valari vessel, sensing weakness, hungering to erase it from existence. An alarm shrieked as shields cracked, hull plating buckled. The Valari cried out, but the soldier roared above the chaos. "Hold fast, do not surrender, do not close your eyes. You are not prey anymore. You are part of us now." Then a new signal cut through the madness, faint at first but growing louder. A chorus of voices carried on the comms. This is Fleet Orion responding to Hale's beacon. This is the Ark survivors breaking through the rim. This is Outpost Vanguard answering the call. One after another, signals burst through the static, coordinates lighting across the void, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of ships answering. Ships that had been scattered across forgotten corners of the galaxy. Survivors who had hidden for centuries, broken fleets rising once more, humanity returning not as fragments, but as a storm reborn. The Valari gasped as the darkness filled with light. New fleets tearing through hyperspace. Engines blazing like suns, dreadnoughts flying the banners of Earth. Carriers releasing waves of fighters like swarms of fireflies. Warships forged in silence, now roaring back into the galaxy, with fury and with purpose. And the Empire wavered for the first time, their endless tide shuddering as they faced not a broken remnant, but a people returned in force. The human soldier's voice shook with fire as he pressed his hand to the glass, tears burning his eyes. They all came, for you, because you saved me, because you chose life, and for that choice, humanity has returned. The Valari felt their hearts surge with a power they had never known, courage blooming where only fear had lived, and though they had no weapons, no armies, they raised their voices, chanting in unison, a song of defiance that echoed through their ship, carried across the comms, weaving with the human war cry until the void shook with unity, the sound of two peoples standing together as one. The Empire struck again, their dreadnoughts unleashing fire that split the darkness. But the new human fleets answered with weapons burning brighter, railguns tearing through armor, plasma storms ripping across their lines, torpedoes blooming like suns as enemy vessels shattered one by one. And for every human ship that fell, two more surged forward, a tide of fire greater than the Empire had ever faced. The Valari vessel shuddered, its hull torn, systems failing. Yet the human fleet shielded it with their own bodies of steel, ships locking into position around it, forming a living wall, refusing to let it fall. And the Valari wept as they realized the truth. They were not just protected, they were embraced, held in the center of a storm of fire and fury, carried not as burden, but as kin. The Empire fleet began to fracture, commanders shouting in desperation, ships breaking formation, their endless tide faltering as the human storm grew stronger, and through the chaos the human soldier whispered, his voice trembling but fierce, "This is what it means to face us. This is what it means to save one of us. You never face only one. You face all." Then with a roar that shook the stars, the human dreadnought Valor surged forward, its cannons unleashing a barrage that split the lead Empire ship in two, flames pouring across the void, the enemy line breaking wide open, and humanity surged through like fire through dry grass, tearing into the heart of the Armada. Every strike a promise kept, every explosion a vow repaid. The Valari felt their fear melt away, their eyes wide with wonder, and they whispered to each other, "We are not alone. Not anymore. They have returned. They have truly returned." And in that moment they understood that the galaxy itself had changed, that the balance of power had shifted, not because of strength alone, but because of one choice, one act of compassion, one human saved. As the Empire fleet collapsed, ships scattering into the void, humanity pressed on, driving them back, forcing them into retreat, and the Valari ship drifted within the storm, alive, battered but unbroken, shielded by the very people they had once only read of in distant legends. The battle was not the end, only the beginning, for the galaxy would burn with new wars, new struggles. Yet in that moment the Valari knew they were no longer prey, no longer doomed, for they had allies who would stand beside them. And the human soldier, his body weak but his spirit unyielding, whispered with the last of his strength, "You saved me, so we returned for you, and together we will not fall." The stars burned bright with fire, and though the war was far from over, hope rose like dawn, carried on the wings of humanity reborn.